Hi, good morning, everybody. What I'm going to do is to give you a very quick run-through of the past 3+ sessions that I've gone through online, so that it's just a very, very quick refresher to help you to understand what it takes for the innovation ecosystem to eventually build and be successful. All right, the very first thing that we are talking about right from the very beginning, we understand that why you need an innovation ecosystem. In fact, this morning we just had a conversation very quickly about innovation ecosystem, well-versed in city planning, city development, and is educated in US, right? So Yamada-san, please.
Thank you, Professor Alex, for very kind introduction of myself. And very good morning to all of you. Also, for those participating online. Okay, thank you. Again, my name is Tetsuya Yamada, Chief Representative of JICA Sri Lanka office. I would like to extend my warmest welcome to all of you. Thank you very much for joining us for this innovation masterclass. So I'm going to walk you through my deck to try to explain to you what is JICA. I guess and I hope many of you has heard about JICA, but I just wanted to give you the brief overview of what we are and what we do in this particular country. And so I tried to be short actually, but let me just take more or less 10 minutes for you to understand what we are. So we've been here in this beautiful country for over 70 years, although we established our office in the year of 1982. But we started our operations of ODA cooperation back in 1954, exactly 70 years back. So throughout these 70 years of history between us, we have accepted more than 14,000 Sri Lankan trainees in JICA training courses everywhere in Japan, also and some other countries as well. And we have dispatched over 3,000 JICA experts, like Professor Alex himself is one of these 3,000 experts that we have dispatched to Sri Lanka.
JICA is doing. I just want to highlight two very interesting points that I see on his presentation, right? From a government standpoint, okay, you always think that the government will have to do everything, but just looking at what Yamada-san's presentation, something I find very interesting is that when he mentioned about the JICA achievement, the number one thing is not about how much money they spend in Sri Lanka. They have a lot of audience. It's very, very difficult to do better than your baby. So it's very simple. I kill his baby. Kills his baby, bankrupt the whole thing. Yeah, leave the politician out.
JICA and Sri Lanka has a long-standing good relationship between the two countries, and we started our ODA operations in 1954. Right after we joined the Colombo Plan. That's the starting point of JICA's, ODA operations in Sri Lanka. Since then, throughout this 70 years of long period of cooperation between the two countries, for example, when it comes to yen loan, we have made so far, I think, nearly 120 loans for various projects, mainly infrastructure development, but not only infrastructure, but also, social development, social protection, and things like that, which amounts to the about 1.1 trillion Japanese yen, which is about, I think, 2.4 trillion Sri Lankan rupees. That's a cumulative total commitment so far JICA has ever committed to the government of Sri Lanka. Yeah. And when it comes to technical cooperation, we accepted more than 14,000 Sri Lankan trainees to Japan, and some of them are accepted to some other third countries, but mainly Japan. And we have dispatched over 3,000 JICA experts here and there in the country in various fields. So through this cooperation, we have made a tangible, remarkable, achievements. For example, in the water sector, we are providing safe drinking water to about 3.5 million population in Sri Lanka, and take the expressway network, for example. We have built over a third of the total length of the express network in this country. So we are, contributing a lot to the social and economic development of this country. I think Sri Lanka can play a big role here in many terms. Of course, everyone can talk about the geopolitical, position of Sri Lanka, but not only the geopolitical point of view, but also, economic sense. I think, Sri Lanka can play a big role in the regional economic development as well as the global economic development. Because of the, if you take a look at the whole region, you have India, you have Bangladesh, all these big players, growing so fast. I think, that can be benefited for Sri Lanka to gain some economic profit. First of all, I think Sri Lanka has a big potential in terms of, growing the startup market. The startup genome, produces the report every year, and the recent version of the genome report talks about the Sri Lanka potential, and it basically says Sri Lanka ranks number 4 in terms of global ecosystem in the affordable talent. So that really shows how how much potential Sri Lanka has in growing the ecosystem for startups. And JICA is quite known as the ODA provider for infrastructure projects, as I told you earlier. But we don't actually, we do not only work together with the government sector, but also we are increasingly cooperating with the private sector as well. And I think, in the private sector, I think startup should be supported much. Because from JICA's perspective, I think there is a huge room for entity like JICA to support the growth of the startup, because we do have the numbers of roles to play in supporting startup, because we do financing, even we do finance the private projects as well. I mean, our support to the private sector project goes directly to the private entity. We do equity financing, we do debt financing for private projects. And financing is not the only thing we do, but also we do technical assistance for private entities in terms of making a feasibility study, market research, and things like that. And one of the most important things that we do in the private sector is to develop the enabling environment, which is also very much needed for supporting the startup system, because creating an ecosystem needs to be guided by the policy of the host government. So we do have strong stakes through the lot of cooperation that we do in the public sector. So we can talk to the government for making a better enabling environment for startups.
Oh, yeah, okay. Two global.
The term digital economy mainly went into mainstream around 2019. And before that, one aspect of digital economy that we spoke about was the IT BPM industry. Industry which have grown many times in a, I would say, quite a fast growing industry in Sri Lanka, which is hitting about $2 billion of export revenue now. Back in the day, in maybe 2003, when ICTA started, it was about $100 million or even less. So it grew to those numbers of billion or $2 billion right now throughout this period. During that time, we were known as a country for offshore development. There were either it's BPM, like HSBCs of the world, or IT, like IFSs of the world, which set up in Sri Lanka, and we had a large number of workforce employed there. Even now, it's the same thing, but we see that there are so many homegrown companies which have set up their operations as entrepreneurs in our country. Earlier, if you can maybe count some of those homegrown companies just with your fingers of your hand, now it has grown to more than 800 companies which are across the country. And 1/3 of them is outside the Western province. And that's how this homegrown culture, or what we call companies with their IP in Sri Lanka, is growing. So tech industry is just one part of digital economy, and the digital economy as a calculation was done back in 2021, and we accounted $3.5 billion contribution to the digital economy. That's about 4.3% at that time. And recently we published that it has grown, even in a time of turmoil in our country and economic crisis, it has grown to almost 5%. And even nominal value growth from $3.5 million to close to $4 billion, $4 billion of economic revenue to the GDP. So what we see here is, even though some of the other aspects of our GDP is contracting, we see that the elements of digital economy, which is the IT industry, e-commerce, and computer services, telecommunications, they have grown even in a negative growth economy. Especially e-commerce, the statistics according to central bank is that we have grown from about, my memory is correct, about $500 million to $700 million within a year, the growth of e-commerce in the country. Digital transactions in our country, according to central bank, is $32 billion. That's the amount of transactions that you see taking place in many different forms, many digital forms. So these are very important aspects of the digital economy that we see, I would say, in pockets. So, and how do we reap this benefits of the digital economy? How could the common man use it? So we've seen some of it taking place during, especially the time that we had during the COVID-19, where a lot of home businesses they came into play and used logistic support such as PickMe or Kapruka or type of different logistic supports that were given to home bakers, people who were cooking food from home. So a lot of different types of cloud kitchens came into play, and new types of employment took place. We have a program in ICTA called Suhuruliya, which is empowering women for digital. And we've supported about 15,000 female entrepreneurs during the course of its program. And there are so many stories of such women who, as an example, there's one particular person who did desserts and ice creams using different types of fruit, jack, and different types of things that you might not really think about. But during that COVID time, she really hit a kind of a wall, because there was no way to take these things out. She couldn't put them into markets. So she used social media, used different types of online platforms to deliver, and now she's growing. She has a really good story on that. We've seen the startup ecosystem growing in the support structure of the startup ecosystem, growing from about few programs to multiple programs done through corporates, so incubators, accelerators, which were earlier done by government, and then maybe certain private entities. Now corporates are getting into it. We've seen community builders and community events growing across the country. So during the past 7 years, we saw new activities, new entities coming in, and therefore I would say one of the reasons that the startups also have confidence that they have support to now get into starting their own business. So where do we lack? One thing that I learned from session held with Dr. Alex is that the growth curve or supporting the startups on their journey is mostly started with them building their product and then looking at the market and then growing. But the model which were introduced to us, where you bring the market access part first, you do your customer validation, you understand your market, you understand the pain points that you're addressing first during ideation stage, which means a lot of exposure, and then start building your product. So it's ideation stage, we need early stage funding coming into play. Exactly, but right now, the investment fraternity that we have, which I'm still thankful for, the Lankan Angel Network and many others, they still would require at least a product with traction for them to look at funding. Apart from a government grant which was earlier there, which is not there right now, there are very, very less amount of organizations who provide that early stage capital. So without that particular company which is at ideation stage, so this should be ideally to come for startups who are at the ideation stage to test the waters, who gives them that capital. So that's the dearth that we have in Sri Lanka. And then, yes, there is certain capital available through angel investments and certain funds which supports your seed. This I'm talking about pre-seed, which there's seed. But then after that, then when you want to get into your Series A, you only have a few VC capital firms in Sri Lanka supporting it, and some VC firms which have now, set up in Singapore, who's now looking at Sri Lanka. But we need more traction built in Sri Lanka. So it's a bit of a chicken and egg. How do we create those companies which could get valued at $1 billion? How do you provide that entire funnel from universities, from the community, solving real world problems so that the investors will have a really good deal pipeline to invest in? As opposed to, how do you now attract the investors to a country where we are trying to build this deep pipeline? Because when the investment comes in, and when there is hope of investment, more will come into entrepreneurship. So there are many challenges that we have identified through a report called the Startup Friendly Government Report. It's published and it's on the website. We've identified 29 impediments, 16 organizations, government organizations who can remove some of those impediments. And we did start work with the government on it, and we are still trying to move the needle in terms of that support that government needs to give, government giving a platform. How do you get the private sector players together? But one role that we as ICT always try to play was a connector. And Dr. Alex also spoke about this, that there has to be someone who drives, like he drove the ecosystem through BASH. I've been to BASH, I've seen the environment, we tried to replicate some of it here and we were successful as well, and we got inspired through it. But who drives that? Is it an entity? Is it people? Is it a community? Just to keep everyone together, connect everyone to other people. Startup Genome calls this a cornerstone organization who connects everyone and takes it forward. So based on Startup Genome's work or the GSER report, we hit about $244 million of ecosystem valuation. That's like the market cap in a stock market. The ecosystem valuation, it's a total amount or total calculation of all valuations of companies who have raised funding in Sri Lanka. It's $244 million. That's pretty low. We should be at the billion stage.
You notice that 20% of people is actually quite a lot, right? 1 million people, there are 200,000 of them have the email through many email calls. So is it worthwhile to solve? And for the consignee, is that it's cash on delivery at the destination, it's cash flow good, lower inventory carrying costs, you can negotiate with the shipper for a better price. Because shipper, you already got the money now there already, okay? Can you sell me cheaper already? And shipper usually agree. And so he will buy it cheaper, and then at the destination, he pay the interest exactly a lot there, and he will also bypass the lending.
I think I opened my eyes to a lot about what we can do to kind of collaborate with the different kind of stakeholders. It also kind of made me understand when you look at a co-working space, it's not just having a space, it's you need to think about how the entrepreneurs think, how they feel in that space. All of that plays a part. So even if you're doing like a corporate accelerator, there's no point in just having a space. It needs to be well thought out that, it meets to their kind of, how would you say, their thought process, their mindset to kind of make sure that whatever space we have, whatever is surrounding them is always helpful for them. I think a lot of what the startup ecosystem wants is trust, in my opinion. A lot of young entrepreneurs, there are a lot of good ideas out there, but a lot of them have struggled to kind of find their first customer or customers in general. I think something that corporates like us can do, our USPs basically, if you take John Keel's holdings for an example, we have over 70 companies. So we have a lot of companies which are basically at the forefront of many industries. So what we can provide, or corporates like us can provide to young entrepreneurs, is that market access. To provide them an opportunity to understand how to deal with a big customer, or through John Keel's how to deal with large, big number of customers. Because at the end of the day, a lot of them have an issue of getting there, as well as at the same time, another factor I think we really need to solve in Sri Lanka is funding. I think funding, there is only so much that even a corporate would do. I think the next step would be actually to get the corporates together and leverage the banks. Because I feel like in Sri Lanka, when it comes to startups, banks don't really look kindly at entrepreneurs. They feel like, you have to have security to get a loan. Even if it's a great idea, they have investment value, banks would be like, look, no, I don't want to give you a loan. So I think something that corporates can do for the ecosystem is to leverage some of the bigger banks, at least as a start, maybe give small loans. So that, I think I've spoken to a lot of other stakeholders like Sachin at ICT, and question that always comes up is how do we solve this funding problem for early stage startups. And I think if we can convince some of the banks to start giving out at least maybe a few loans every year, that's something that these young entrepreneurs will really need. I think it's a bit of both. There are some entrepreneurs who have a vision. For example, John Keel's ex is invested in a company called Gavesha Labs, and his vision is to basically reinvent education in Sri Lanka. And then at the same time, we've had certain founders who've just given it up and kind of moved abroad to study or look for greener pastures. So I feel right now is a really good place for the country, because even big corporates are struggling to pay good salaries to employees. And I think entrepreneurship is kind of looking like a very lucrative avenue for young people. So I think if we can kind of change that culture, that perception that a lot of people have that, being an entrepreneur is like, you're risking it all, you're giving up your job. Because there's so much potential there as opposed to doing a 9-to-5 job.
Well, the number one you mentioned about it is that ecosystem. Ecosystem is one of the most important thing in terms of innovation system. So when you have a working ecosystem, you'll be able to have everything run on its own, basically run helping each other, and there's no external additional force that you need to inject on it, constantly pushing. So in Sri Lanka, I think the situation is that the economy is having some difficulty. So in order for us to be able to rejuvenate the ecosystem, building the ecosystem is number one criteria that we are looking for. So in order to do that, the best thing is for all the people, everybody in the ecosystem is able to now know what they want to do, what they should be doing, coordinate to do that. So the purpose of the Masterclass is not really too much of teaching the knowledge, by helping each other to understand each other's role, be more open about it in order to achieve a synchronized effort to come up with a master plan where we can togetherly build a very, very wonderful innovation ecosystem for Sri Lanka. Well, I would say that Sri Lanka have a very good ecosystem components. So they are based on the MIT Innovation Ecosystem Model. We will have the government that's encouraging to do something. We have the university is churning out graduates. You have the university is also doing wonderful research. You have corporation that's large enough to help to governize the ecosystem, and you have risk capital, although they are small, the smallest element, but they're still working very well. Last but not least, have a lot of entrepreneurial young people. They are willing and wanting to start their business. So all the components that I can see in my masterclass, that everybody is there. And everybody is knowledgeable about their own sector. So that's a good part of it. But the insufficient part is that the ecosystem is individual, but the component, the stakeholders are not working together. The component, the stakeholders, sometimes they are not having the knowledge about their other counterparts within the ecosystem. For example, the entrepreneur doesn't know how does the investor want to invest, right? The corporation do not know that their objective and the investor are quite different. And the government is not very much aware of all these other components, how they could work together. So through the masterclass, I think a lot of people that now within the class are more aware of their counterparts' needs and their counterparts' desire to move forward. And at the end of the class, okay, we conducted a masterclass, master plan planning sessions. And you'll notice that everybody start now talking to each other to be able to understand that, oh, that's what you need. Oh, that's what I can provide. Eventually, they will be able to derive out a very, very good master plan to build their ecosystem. So I think the good and the bad of the ecosystem situation in Sri Lanka is that the components are there. The bad of it is that it is not synchronized. So it makes our effort of doing the master plan a lot easier in this sense. We already started the masterclass. We get the people understand about it. And the knowledge is also archived online so that people can go back and review and understand each other a lot better. I mean, the most important thing is actually to a lot of activities and opportunity for everybody to be able to communicate. So communication is the most important thing to enable everybody to be able to work together. So the next step for me will be running the Open Innovation Challenge. So in Open Innovation Challenge, basically, it starts from the corporations, who is the market, will be able to surface up some of the viable and interesting problem statements for the entrepreneur to start working on it. At the same time, that we will have a mentor, and we have university students, and eventually the investor will be looking through the result coming out this one. So Open Innovation Challenge will last about a week, a month and a half, that enable people to have an opportunity to collaborate. But ultimately, all these things will be able to surface a lot of very useful observation that we can plan for the next step to massively energize the Sri Lanka ecosystem.